The secrets of wisdom and knowledge for those seeking insight into the mind of women can be found in the rom-com and in the chick flick. And men have explored the ocean deep, vast oriental mountain ranges. They have plunged face first into bubbling volcanoes in order to just grasp a hint of femininity and what it means. Turns out the secret knowledge has been in front of our eyes this entire time in 2001 Disney classic coming of age chick flick Princess Diaries. Now, Princess Diaries is personally nostalgic for me, and it also hits that aesthetic sweet spot. Before the mid-2000s, I tend to prefer just lighting and set design and color coding in movies of the early 2000s and before, and I strongly dislike those cinematographic values in movies afterwards, but let's try to dive into the substance of Princess Diaries and see what's going on there. So, turns out what women ultimately desire is to not be an American. If Princess Diaries is anything to go by, what women want is to not be Americans. And here's what I mean by that. So all of Mia's struggle in her life, her angst, comes from the fact that she's insecure about basically everything. And she's insecure about everything for various reasons, but for one a key reason, well, she's just, incompetent at everything. And why is this the case? It's because her mother deliberately raised her that way. Her mother, says this explicitly in the movie, didn't want her to be raised up with any real knowledge of her inheritance and her obligations and responsibilities of who her family really is, who her identity really is. Didn't want her to be raised with the sort of skills and obligations that go with that. Instead, wanted her to grow up like a normal American kid who just consumes things and grows up clumsy and awkward and not knowing how to run anything, and only feels obligated in this sort of global activist sense that's very vague. That mentality is actually going to kick in and be part of what convinces Mia to accept her role as a princess, because she realizes, I can, change the world, whatever that means. But anyways, Mia is insecure and dysfunctional, but then here appears her grandmother from the old world who comes in just offering her, identity and meaning and a name. Comes in promising, along with that, fame and wealth and like a real education and real responsibilities that go with that. Monarchy itself. Literally monarchy. The problem is that Mia is deliberately trained to not be able to govern anything. Can't even govern her own life. Can't even give a speech in front of her classmates. And this to me is tragic because that is realistic to what American teenagers experience. Not that everyone needs to be trained to be, an actual royal monarch or an actual, statesman or stateswoman. But there's something sort of innately human and good about being raised to exercise control and management over, just projects in general, whether it's not like an actual position of command over others. It might just be being good at accomplishing basic tasks. Either way, her mom wanted her to be normal, and then normal is just this typical blasé kind of American attitude of letting schools do all the work of inculcating skills into children, and then the schools don't really do that, but it doesn't really matter anyway for the most part. At these schools, even the special prep school that she's a part of, the kids are mostly spacing out, goofing off, and just getting into trouble with boys. More on that later. We've got to stay on target. What else does this movie tell us that women desire? Unlimited wealth and status. Okay. Getting glammed up. Having a good cry. The movie features all these things. Finding peace between social expectations and inner desire, duty and the heart. Having the wrong kind of boys interested in you, but ultimately rejecting them, and then ending up with a talented, charismatic Sigma male. I think that Michael in this film is just a clear example of the Sigma male archetype. And I think women want all of these things, in different measures, depending on their personality and their interests. Different things are more appealing to them inherently, but then when you become a princess, you get all of it. Ladies, if you feel like this is an accurate portrayal of your deep felt desires, please let me know, or if you would push back or nuance that. So I would say that in this film, her mom is kind of like the real understated antagonist in all of this, because she was the mom who just wanted to live her dream. Instead of being a queen consort and raising an intact family who just happens to be royal, she would prefer to throw darts at paint-filled balloons in San Francisco. And now she's rapidly aging and loveless, and she ends up dating her daughter's high school history teacher just to find some basic security and stability in her life. And as a high school history teacher, I have to say that's a pretty steep decline in terms of like possible mate acquisition. Like, literal crown prince, high school teacher. Why did she give that up? They weren't going to let her throw darts in Genovia. They weren't going to let her climb walls in Genovia. Regardless, she felt that taking on this role would stifle her freedom. And so it's fine if her daughter doesn't grow up with her father, as long as she gets to have her freedom. And this decision-making process is totally bizarre to me, but I don't think it's necessarily unrealistic. It's unfortunate. But pretending for a moment that European nobility aren't just already part of the celebrity class anyway, and that they actually have real governing power the way that they do in Genovia. They do several things to indicate that Julie Andrews is like actually a head of state who makes important diplomatic decisions and this sort of thing. She seems to actually be a sovereign, which is cool. But the whole idea that, Mia's mom would rather choose freedom, whatever that is, over the responsibility and status of rule actually does kind of seem plausible. Because, well, let's be frank, it's a very American sentiment, right? So this movie does a very good job of showing, I think, that freedom can be very fun, but it's also pretty empty. And I don't think that the movie was intended to be like this dunk on artsy feminist, intentionally single mothers. But the criticism kind of like feels implicit in the contrasting decision that Mia ends up making to embrace her identity as a royal and as a future sovereign, essentially. She goes down a path that is very different from her mother. And maybe that's another thing that we can put in terms of Princess Diaries revealing the fulfillment of the female fantasy, which is in this aspect not making the same mistakes that your mother did. Anyway, it really is interesting that Mia feels conflicted about becoming a princess, because you think in this sort of like wish fulfillment fantasy, wouldn't she just like leap at the chance to become a princess? Doesn't every girl want to become a princess? I mean, it's a Disney movie, come on, Nevertheless, the whole conflict of the movie is her uncertain about whether to embrace this identity of princess. And it makes sense, because while there's certain aspects of it that are immediately desirable, this new identity of being a princess threatens her old identity, her old place in life, as she has understood it up till now, and it's triggering her insecurities about having to be in front of other people. She, as a princess, she would now become a public figure, and so all the kind of drama of the movie revolves around. Excuse me. All the drama of the movie revolves around being a public figure, and the fear of that. There's this key moment where she says, "I am invisible and I am wet," and I'm not going to read any further into that. I feel like it speaks for itself. She wants to be revealed to the world as this beautiful princess. But she feels incredibly timid in front of the mocking masses and the bad boys. And so she feels this constant attraction to invisibility because she just isn't secure. I don't feel protected, she just flat out says at one moment. So how do things change? By the end, Hector Elizondo in this movie, or Joe, as his character is called, he's become a total father figure for her. He encourages her when she needs it, reprimands her when she needs it, and he protects her. He is attentive and discerning with just what's going on with her life, but then he lets her have her own space and make her own decisions. And finally, he's there to rescue her when she really needs it. He comes for her when she's stuck in the rain, which would, typically in a movie be this sort of romantic gesture, but here it's the father figure, and so it's this storgic moment of loyalty and trust being displayed and rescue rather than any sort of romantic thing. Though Joe is just the grandmother's spy master / dance partner, implied consort, he's way more fatherly than her real father ever seemed to be. Joe could have been this character who's just, obsequious, or he's just mean or whatever, but here they have the character to strike this balance, and in doing so, he ends up being one of the better father figures like in any Disney movie. And he's not even her father. He's the sort of secret boyfriend of her grandma, but he's a great guy. So he's this guardian of royalty, but at the same time, because he answers to this higher authority, he doesn't really feel the need to be her slave or just cater to her every whim. And he's really comfortable kind of like being in that otherwise awkward position. And I think that allegorically you could see that as the model of what a father could be to his daughter as she enters womanhood. I imagine like many fathers aren't actually comfortable in that position, and they could learn a thing or two from Joe here. Due to his constant protection and advice, Mia's able to process everything that she needs to process, make the decisions that she needs to make. Yes, a woman wants to be a princess, but prior to that, she needs a father who's going to protect her, mitigate the damage of the mistakes that she makes, explain things, speak on her behalf, and carve out a space for her to, help her work through her own problems so that she can move forward confidently on her own at the appropriate time at her pace. So, being a princess is great and all, but the real gift that Mia receives, besides, the wealth or the possible fame, or even just, identity, this name, the real gift is she receives people who are willing to just be actual parents to her in ways that her biological parents weren't able or willing to do. So Joe and the Queen basically step in to accomplish everything her real parents weren't. They guide her and they empower her, unlike her absent father and her quirky mom. And not to say that her actual mom is portrayed as being a horrible mom. Like, obviously she seems to be a really nice person who really cares for her daughter and is like supportive and encouraging, and that's great. But she just, because of the decisions that she made for herself, she sort of put her daughter in this really, really awkward position that wouldn't otherwise be the case. So it's definitely a complicated situation. It's not that, certainly the movie doesn't portray her as awful, and even though I'm very inclined to think of her as sort of being an awful person, it's not just a straight shot that way. She's a complicated individual. Anyway, all of this good character development, I think, is something that many people can identify with, male or female, which is why this is just a good movie for people rather than just a chick flick. It is a chick flick, but it has relevance beyond the chicks. Awkwardness, the temptation to be invisible, the burden of inheritance. These are things that everyone has to sort out. And Princess Diaries may be totally Disneyfied on the surface, but deep down, it's this piercing indictment, I think, of American domestic culture, and it's this story of a woman gaining a true knowledge of who she actually is. She's not just this, dumb American teenager. Deep down, she's actually a noble, and there's power that comes with that. But with the power of a sovereign comes all of this crushing responsibility as well. And I think that that's a realization that maybe not in a literal sense, but in a symbolic sense, more people need to come to an awareness of. Deep down, this awareness that you do have, as a human being, this kind of noble status that's given to you, but you need to embrace that and take on the responsibilities of that, even if you've forgotten who you are, even if your family has forgotten your real identity or not revealed to you who you truly are, if that makes sense.
Motion picture. My TV screen. A home away from home. And I'm living in between.